Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know this is a really busy week with a million different events going on that you've had invitations to, so we really appreciate you being here. I just wanted to give a very, very swift background really to the program and where all this came from our side. So really this started with a conversation between myself and Theresa here, who looks after our PR, but more than anything is very much a connector within this world and brings together all of these wonderful people. And when I first joined 16.3, Theresa kind of entered a conversation with me about the history of the sofa, which was something that, of course, being Theresa, she knew a huge amount about and dug into the history of kind of dating back to something like 2000 BC with the sufa, which is an Arabic word. And the original sufas were sort of benches with cushions that were not for lounging, but lined rooms designed very much for discussion, designed for conversation. And it's a tradition that remains today in many countries. You have the Dawanya in Kuwait, for example, and also across many continents. So and we're talking through some of the African examples, our favorite being the Palava hut, based on the name, where communities would come together and would discuss, would debate, and would solve kind of critical issues. And nobody leaves until the issue is solved. In other parts of that continent, the huts are designed with a very, very low ceiling, so that nobody can stand if the conflict resolution is not going so well. The conversation obviously then kind of developed to Europe and to the salons that started in Italy and sort of flourished in France. And we thought it would be really lovely to try and recreate some of the spirit of those events and bring people together from across the built environment to discuss and debate and sometimes probably disagree on a number of topics from that sphere, and that's really where 16.3 Salon came from. So this evening is intended to be sort of close and intimate and interactive, and I'm sure David will encourage you to join in and to take part in it as well. We're delighted to kick off with a really incredible panel and led by an incredible host who I will introduce. It's David Taylor, writer, podcaster, and now filmmaker, I think as well.
I see him.
Yeah. David hosts a podcast called Detailer, which I have to say a little personal recommendation. It is fantastic. Again, another space having really great conversations with some really great people. So if I can hand over to you, David, and we'll kick off from there.
Thank you very much. I feel pressure now. Palava hut, that's interesting. Is that where the word comes from, Palava?
Yes, exactly.
Wow, amazing. So hello everybody. Thank you very much, David, and for hosting tonight. We are going to have, as it says, a conversation, a salon conversation about curious places for conversation. And that's the thing that threads between what our three speakers will be talking about. I'll introduce each speaker, and then Emma is in the hot seat for the first period, where she'll be showing some slides, and I'll be asking her some questions principally about the book that she's written called Wild Sauna. We'll discuss what that's all about, but you can sort of guess from its title. And we'll discuss that for 5 to 10 minutes with your slides, and then you'll move out of the hot seat, and then you'll go in, and then you'll go in at the end, and then we'll have a discussion at the end. But please feel free to interject and ask any questions as they arise. So I'll be scanning the audience to put your hands up to ask any question about the presentation or anything else. So I've written a little introduction, so I'll just read that. And so we've got Emma O'Kelly, who is a journalist and contributing editor of Wallpaper magazine, and has written this excellent book, as I showed you before, on the phenomenon of the wild sauna. She's been on something of an odyssey these last few years, because there's another book directly down here, which she did on saunas across Europe, traveling across Europe for this, and investigating really the power of heat and cold. You're a cold water swimmer as well, aren't you? In remote settings. And it struck me, perhaps we could start with your slides. It struck me firstly that Firstly, could you describe how you came to write this book? But first, even before that, describe what makes a wild sauna as opposed to a regular run-of-the-mill David Lloyd gym sauna.
Well, yes. I mean, many would argue that a David Lloyd gym sauna is not a sauna.
Right.
Many of the people I've met, but a wild sauna, that is designed by a carpenter who lives in Devon, who has designed Hackney rooftops, which maybe some people here know. And he's also designed Brixton, which are all on, it's a setting on the rooftops in 4 saunas, little saunas, ice baths and a bar. And he did that one for, that is a wild sauna. It's floating on a pond in the Isle of Wight. And he did it as an experiment. He used some shingling techniques from, I think it would be either Estonia or Latvia, perhaps. And a wild sauna is out in nature. Usually there's a body of cold, fresh water to swim in, a sea, a pond, a river. Quite often it's a very DIY aesthetic. Lots of these saunas have been built by enthusiasts. Most of them sort of started doing this either during the pandemic or after the pandemic. And in fact, the first one was where you live in Brighton in 2019.
Beach box.
Yes, the horse box conversion. And I think that became very popular, that sauna. And so suddenly all the horse boxes in the UK were bought up and converted into saunas.
More horses.
Yes, so that's one of the typical wild saunas, the horse box style. But, there you have one.
Sorry to interrupt, but does it require a view out onto the wilderness then?
Yes, I would say ideally you're very much in nature. There's quite often no changing room. There's quite often no running water. So it's a watering can or a dip in the sea. It's very basic.
Yeah.
And it has it's all about the heat. So it's about the stove and the ventilation, and they call themselves Finnish saunas. That most of the people making these saunas, because the stoves, the tradition is Finnish in terms of being able to pour water on the rocks, which every Finn will tell you a sauna is not a sauna unless you can pour water on the rocks. This is like the heart of a sauna, and all the wild sauna people are leaning into the Finnish ideology and philosophy around sauna. So, they're moist and humid, these saunas, and they have a very different heat from, say, a David Lloyd gym sauna. And most of the stoves come from Finland as well, or Estonia, generally speaking. These cultures are the ones that are really influencing. It's Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania that are really influencing this movement.
And there's obvious health benefits which you go into in the book, in both books, I think, don't you? Particularly cardiovascular. Does it follow then that those countries you just listed have excellent health records in that area?
Well, the Finns, as they have now won happiest country in the world, the UNESCO, the UN nomination, I think it's the 8th year in the row now. They are saying they're using sauna as a big marketing technique for this. So they have billboards up about, we're the happiest sauna in the nation, the happiest nation in the world thanks to our sauna culture and so on. So
it's a protected notion, isn't it, in Finland?
It's a protected, and in Estonia, protected by UNESCO. Both of them are cultural, listed on the intangible cultural heritage list, Finnish sauna culture and Estonian smoke sauna culture. This sauna here was 2013 in Margate, actually, and it was designed by the guy who owns Heckles, the beauty brand, which I don't know, maybe some people here know him, but he put that on Margate Beach at a time when Margate was really, really run down and a bit desperate. And that sauna is free for everyone to use. You can just come and go. It's open to whenever you want to use it. And of course, it has a huge, huge following now, a big Facebook group and all sorts of volunteers who look after it. And it was one of the original ones, even though the style is not typical. That's the Victorian bathing machine is what he based that on. It's a more expensive design than than most of the wild saunas in the book.
So going back to my first question, how did you get into writing this particular book?
Well, I wrote because I've worked at Wallpaper for 25 years. I'd go to Scandinavia often and to Finland as well. And I had a really amazing sauna in Finland when I was writing an art story there back in 2016. And we'd been working and shooting all day, and then we all went for the whole evening in and out of the lake, in and out of the sauna. We were drinking beers, eating sausages, hanging out. It was really fun. It was and a really good sauna as well. And I thought, oh God, why don't we have this? Why we have a cold, we live in a cold climate. Why don't we do anything like this where we all get together in this way? And so I connected with the Finnish photographer who I worked on that book with, who's based in Helsinki. And we did a pitch and we sent it out to loads of editors in 2016, and literally everyone rejected it and said, that's a ridiculous idea, no.
Why?
No thanks.
Cost?
Why is that interesting
Right.
as a book? What would this be even? Cost, obviously. There's always cost, isn't there? But then in 2019, when Finnish sauna culture was added to the UNESCO list we've just talked about, Hole and Corner magazine, who maybe some of you know, Tamsin Blanchard remembered we'd done this work, and she commissioned a story. And then another editor remembered as well, and she happened to be the commissioning editor of this book, and said, write this book, but pitch it as a book about the health benefits of sauna, not just an aesthetic coffee table book where you're just listing saunas' names. You actually have to dig in a bit and write about why sauna is so popular and like you said, the cardiovascular benefits. And so it changed tack. And on the back of that, I got commissioned to write this. So they all fed into each other.
And do you think it's a sort of mini trend at the moment then that's growing quite quickly? I mean, you mentioned I live in Brighton. They seem to be popping up there all over the place. Is it a mini trend? And if so, is it caused by the need to escape technology for an hour or what?
Yes, I think it's the coming together of lots of things. So it was the post-pandemic focus on our health that we've seen in lots of things, nutrition and gyms and all the rest. And I think it is a huge factor is the digital detox that it offers as well, because it's one of the few areas where it's steamy and humid, you can't take your phone. And I think particularly for young people, they absolutely need that. They love sauna. The Gen Zs, the whole movement, the wild sauna movement in this country started with the people like me, the middle-aged female swimmers, who started swimming in droves during the pandemic, and there was hundreds and thousands of swim clubs, as you know, around the UK, and the saunas came to heat up the swimmers in the beginning. So the female swimmers came, and the female swimmers brought their partners, and then the kids, and then it became really quite quickly intergenerational, and also has evolved from being a swimming place to people who actually come for the sauna, not for a swim. They like the sauna and maybe they'll have a little cold dip, but it's about the heat, not the cold. So it's sort of evolving. And the more we learn, the more people are getting into it. I think it's just at the beginning, really. I don't think it's a sort of zeitgeisty thing that has peaked.
No.
Well, in Finland, in the Baltics, yes. I saw, when I did the first book, I saw a baby in a little plastic bucket in the sauna. I know, and a pregnant woman who was literally, she must have been about 8.5 months pregnant, and she was in there washing her daughter, her 3-year-old. So, but in this country, there are still, most insurance companies, it's over 16s. They're bringing it down to over 12s, but there are a few where you can take children. Obviously, the wild sauna people really want children to be able to go in the sauna. There's a real radical kind of ideology. They want everyone, it should be accessible, affordable, and for everyone, like it is in Finland. That's the central philosophy.
So to what degree do they stimulate and promote community and conversation, would you say? Does it depend on the design, or are they just, they foster conversation?
Yeah,
readily?
I don't think it's anything to do with the design, because in the previous slide, I'm scared to go back. The tent saunas, you know those.
Oh, I've never seen those before.
Those cost about £1,500, and they're Chinese and Russian fishermen use them, you know, for ice fishing, and there's a big tent sauna movement going on where councils won't give saunas planning permission on beaches because it doesn't fit into one of the categories for whatever they have. You know, you're architects, you'd know more about which boxes you have to tick, and sauna doesn't fit in that box, so they say no. So these tent sauna people are really, really anarchic, and they go around with their tent saunas, and they have Facebook groups, and they pop them up, and people come. And they're really popular. They're really popular. And Guerrilla saunas. Guerrilla saunas, exactly. It's cool. And it started kind of with one guy in the northeast. And now those ones there were in the Wirral, just outside Liverpool. And then that's a yurt sauna there, which is designed by a Scottish man who builds yurts and yurt saunas. And the one on the right is an architect, as you can probably tell. Beautiful architect.
Are these commercial operations? You pay to go to these ones?
Yes. The one on the left is at a East Side Cottages, which is a sort of place you can stay in Scotland, you know, 6 cottages, and you get the sauna. And the other one is Architect's Holiday in Sussex, and that, again, he's built 3 cabins, and that actually is the architect there, sitting, Will Gowling, yes. So you can go and stay, and he built that on his family's land, and he's got 3 cabins, there's a pond, a beautiful little stream, a shower, and that sauna. The drying shed sauna, that's called. And he's just built another one because it's so popular. It's all booked up. This is what's happening. You know, they're, as you know, in Brighton, they're popping up, and they're all busy and they're all full. So I think that's one of the challenges for these sauna owners, is that they're suddenly like really so busy that they don't really know how to handle it.
It's basically it's that and paddle courts.
There's Liz, so David, you've been whisked with birch leaves by the lady.
I've got one of those hats as well.
You're a pro. So that's in Beach Box, Brighton. Yeah, and that's Wales, and there's
So you had 9 months of travelling to all of these, didn't you? And there's about 180 in the book?
There's about 180 in the book, and the book came out in May, and there's now 500 in the UK. From May to now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so in 9 months, that's 2 a week, 3 a week?
Well, obviously I couldn't go to all of them.
Okay.
And I roped in every single member of my family. So my father-in-law lives in Liverpool, and he did all the Northwest. My son was in Wales.
He weighs 1 stone now, does he?
Yeah. So everybody was roped in, because it was like an impossible job, because they were open. The day I was going to press, 3 new saunas opened. I just had to have a cut-off point. And that was the frustrating thing about doing trying to document such a fast-moving scene in a slow, old-fashioned process, like a book, So, but it was a marker in the sand. The book is there to say this is a thing. A wild sauna is a thing now, so we can build from that. And it's the British Sauna Society who's documenting all the new saunas on a map, and so they know exactly what's opening and when, and keeping tabs on everything that's going on.
And can you just outline the health benefits that are involved with saunaing and then going into the cold plunge?
Yes, so the cardiovascular are the main ones, as you said. Another reason why I think it's booming is because a 20-year study from a Finnish cardiologist, his study was published in 2019, which showed that if you sauna like 3 to 4 times a week, your risk of cardiovascular illnesses can reduce by up to 50%. So it's huge. It was an absolutely huge finding. And
so the NHS really should be involved in this in a sense.
NHS should be totally involved in this. And there's a movement to try and get the NHS to socially prescribe sauna like it does with, forest bathing or going for a walk, or that's something the British Sauna Society is trying to do. But as lots of GPs that we've talked to about this say, it's one thing going for a walk in a park. It's another thing getting someone to take off all their most of their clothes and go and sit in a small, dark, hot, confined space with strangers. It's quite an ask. Even for many of us in this room, it's probably quite an ask. So it's challenging. Yeah.
Sorry. Just been told off.
Yeah.
Okay, that question.
Best conversations in the sauna. That's all the slides as well. Yes. Of course. When I was doing the UK book, I was saying to David earlier, actually, so many people's struggles, health struggles, mental health, physical health, loneliness. They really are building communities, these saunas. Lots of people go, they have to go once or twice a week. It's a lifeline, I go and I've met all these new friends. I've got connections now. I've just moved to this area, and the first thing I've done is find the sauna and the beach and connect with the swimmers and the sauna people. And they are definitely building communities, 100%, for sure.
Last question for now. Oh, was there one from the floor?
I was just going to say, I love saunas because your skin just looks great when you come out of the sauna.
Yeah, skin as well.
For me, that is the first reason why you want it, because it's as if all the alcohol just comes out. It's like your skin just wants to excrete. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But my question is they look wonderful. They look like objets d'art in a landscape. They're wonderful, and they're talking points. They're little architectural follies, aren't they? Which is great. But have you met your local plumber in there? Do you know what I mean?
When it goes wrong.
Yeah, the one who fixes it.
Do you know what I mean? Your local plumber, your roofer. Have you really got?
You're saying it's a middle-class pursuit.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking a question.
No, I think this is another of the challenges with it. It is.
In Lithuania, you might.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
And maybe in on the Finchley Road, you might down at David, not David Lloyd, but the other one that's on the Finchley Road. But in these, not so much. Well, I haven't been to all of them, so I can't. But I would say that is one of the observations about this. Is it is quite a middle class, undiverse, intergenerational, yes. But it's not as diverse as it should be or could be.
The park run, for example, that started off as quite a middle class thing, didn't it? But if you go to the park run in Peckham, for example, everybody uses it. So that's an example.
Well, exactly, and that is everybody's aware of it as well. They know that everybody in this world knows that this isn't diverse enough, and they're trying to do more outreach or whatever you want to call it to bring in different groups. And you can pay, they do pay forward, so you can go and pay for some sessions for somebody who can't afford to go, things like that. So,
what about body types? Have you got some, you've got some very, very variable body. I know it's a big deal.
Well, I don't know what to say. Sorry, David,
I've had a glass of wine.
You're the boss.
I can't remember seeing, very large people in saunas, in my experience. Have you seen very large people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
No, it's not body beautiful. No.
Okay, well, I think that's what he's getting at, isn't it?
That's what you mean, no.
Yeah, I think that's your first barrier right there.
Yeah, no, that is not body beautiful.
Okay.
I would say no. It's everyone in that way.
Okay.
Inclusive and hopefully if people feel welcome. I think I don't get that sense from any of the sauna owners or people that go that it's that. But
like Mastermind, with the buzzer going, this is your last question before you get out the hot seat. So are you addicted to the whole sauna movement? How often do you do it?
So addicted to the heat. Yes, right. No, I'm addicted. I feel better. It's like you're saying, probably like with the cold, because I'm addicted to the hot and the cold. I like them both, ideally. I don't like a sauna unless I can get properly cold afterwards, and a cold shower is okay. but it's not as good as a proper immersion. But yes, I just feel so much better.
Which is
when I
not
do
a
it.
new idea, is it? It goes back to Roman times with the
Yeah.
frigidarium and the caldarium and
Yes.
all of that
Yeah.
business. Right, the buzzer has gone.
Yes.
Could you give her a quick clap while we change over? Okay, Jennifer. So, whilst you're moving, I shall do my little introduction. So, this is Jennifer de Vere-Hopkins, who is an architect and associate director at Gestico and Wiles. She's designed schemes including the National Graphene Institute in Manchester. There's a great book on that by David Taylor. And the W Hotel in Edinburgh. I'm hoping she can talk a little bit about designing pubs on cruise ships, particularly the Iona cruise ship, the practice designed, but also schemes like Brasserie 1869 at the Hurlingham Club. And she promises to do this through a discussion of loos, lifts, and lobbies, facilitating conversations between the main event. So, do you want to kick off with your slides?
Yeah,
I can start to ask you some questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for for coming. It's a hard act to follow, I have to say, because it's a very interesting thing to hear about something that you're personally, not part of that world. So we're moving from something wild to something very not wild.
Domesticated.
Yeah. So when this idea of conversations came up, I think I was struggling to sort of think about, what the hook might be. But actually, we do the opposite of wild, and we try and curate designs, and we are focused quite a lot on hospitality spaces, so hotels, bars, restaurants, but hospitality kind of bleeds into lots of different areas these days, and you get hospitality influencing retail experiences, work experiences, etc. Education experiences. So, all of those things are things that we cover. When it comes to a hotel experience, that kind of first moment of when you meet a hotel is highly curated, and it's orchestrated in the way the spaces happen. And we talk a lot. This is a Mandarin Oriental hotel, so top end, extremely high end experience. And we often talk about this idea of the kind of cultural difference, which is something I found quite interesting about the idea of the sauna, and perhaps why it hasn't caught on to the same extent here is a kind of cultural thing. So we talk about, culturally speaking, with hotels, people have a threshold anxiety about coming into hotels and coming into these grand spaces. But, somebody like Mandarin Oriental wanted a grand space. They wanted echoes, and they wanted spaces which were, very finely composed, symmetrical. This is all about communicating their brand and stature, and you've arrived. And there's a moment of confrontation with, a desk, and it's quite formal. Other spaces. Oh, wrong way. Other spaces might be quite different. So this is the W in Edinburgh on the left, and it's a very kind of informal brand, and you communicate things very differently. The beginning of your conversation with the brand is very different. But what I find interesting about this is it sort of really places a lot of emphasis on those in-between spaces and how interesting they can be as you pass through them. Some of the best conversations happen in these in-between spaces. We talk a lot about that in design, how you create moments when people are waiting for a lift, or waiting for or finding their way through a corridor of a hotel. How you meet people along the way and strike up this maybe very fleeting conversation, actually, but maybe nonetheless memorable.
Is that the W in London, that one on the right?
No, this is the W in Abu Dhabi, which is on the Formula One racetrack, and
oh yes,
the conversation here is with this idea of the racetrack, and the design represents a kind of close-up of carbon fibre. It creates this kind of mashrabiyah effect between the rooms that sit inside the mesh, the kind of go faster lines on the floor. These are all things which, again, are about design, interior design, having a conversation with a place, which is, what we do all the time. All of our designs have to start with this narrative idea of how you situate a particular building in a location, because otherwise we may as well be designing carbon copies of things all over the world. So, placing some of these in context, a staircase is also a really interesting place for conversations, and we quite often build them, much larger than they need to be functionally to facilitate those crossovers, and particularly in education. And this happens to be a cruise ship. You've got, a lot of people who spend a week together in confined quarters, and it's a very social activity, and it invites you. People go on these alone. They go on them over and over again. They strike up conversations, and they sit with people at dinner, and they kind of circulate through the ship in communities. So it is quite an interesting place to design for.
This is for P&O, isn't it?
This is P&O. So again, a British brand. So culturally speaking, the design is very driven by the way British people want to cruise and spend time together, and there's a formality about it, which is very different from, let's say, a German brand.
How so?
Well, it might surprise you to hear that when we were brought on to design this, all the dining rooms that were included in your cruise were what they call club dining, and you basically get a table and a time, and you turn up there every night, and that's where you eat your dinner. And it's quite revolutionary for them to have broken away from that. And actually it's it's now freedom dining, whereas I think up until a certain point, people were very used to this idea of being told where to be at a certain time. And sitting at the same table for a week. It's kind of bizarre, really, isn't it? It's very particularly cruise. So they're
Horrible.
Well,
we've gone from sauna to this, haven't we?
I know. It's but you know what? We design for all sorts of contexts, and even though you might not get it or want to be there yourself, you have to try your best to understand, how these things are orchestrated. It's a very interesting. This space was a triple height atrium designed to host pop-up events. So they were trying to do things differently, and they were using places like Covent Garden as references. So you could have some music happening or dancing happening in that central space, and even though you couldn't get hundreds of people in one area, you could get them on all the different levels. And we wanted to really kind of create a dialogue with the sea, and because a lot of ships that came before this were about inwards looking, kind of like you're on a floating hotel, and the whole idea here is the sea's amazing. Why don't we encourage people to engage with this kind of landscape or seascape where it's constantly changing? And of course, it's interesting to be out at sea.
Another similarity with the wild saunas in a sense.
Nature, connecting with nature is, for us, why wouldn't you? You have this amazing landscape. This is again the kind of idea of the staircase being something that makes a statement or starts a conversation with your experience. Putting love into these quite small spaces like lift lobbies and creating something memorable is, I think, also quite essential, because you have this moment where you can really actually get up close to all the finishes. And we say to our clients, you must design these spaces for the moment where people can, actually put their hand on the door and feel the quality. Kind of architects do this all the time, but rub the walls and, but when you arrive at that reception desk on the right-hand side, that is solid granite. That's been carved by a craftsman, and you can appreciate some of the concept of the interior of the hotel is about the geology of Edinburgh. And you might not appreciate that, but if you stay there for a long time and you want to engage in the story of the hotel, then those are the kinds of things that help to build interest, and also they help to build some kind of connection so that people want to come back. It's important for businesses to, encourage return guests. And we try to do things that are appropriate to the kind of experience that the brand wants to create. This is an unloved passageway on the right, trying to get people from one part of the hotel, the main part, to a kind of side wing. That could be a really negative experience for a guest who's put in that wing. But by putting the smallest cinema in Edinburgh on the route, it helps to kind of enliven it. And actually what's happened is that area that you see with the rather large planter in the background, that's become a group check-in. So now actually the whole host of people that get that experience, and it's kind of the way that life of hotels work. On the other side is the complete opposite of creating this kind of wow moment like the Mandarin Oriental. This is a boutique hotel where they want you to sit across from them whilst they check you in, and you sit on, quite a comfortable chair, but you're touching a vintage piece of furniture, and there's something that's really deliberately tactile and detailed about that environment, and the acoustic is there, so you've got the sound of the clip clop on the flooring, which is this kind of checkerboard black and white flooring. So all of those things are kind of curated. This idea of meeting the brand and creating this conversation with the guest. So I'm taking you to the mountains here, which is as wild as we get. This is a Kempinski hotel. It's a very well-known brand in central Germany. They operate a lot in mountain resorts, and this is a kind of Grand Dame hotel in the mountains. And it's actually very interesting working in Switzerland because they have a slightly different way of dialoguing with old architecture, and it's quite a fight to get things that are quite new looking sometimes. And so for us, that dialogue between old and new is really important in design. Like, we don't want to create pastiche. That's just the way we have become accustomed to doing things in the UK. So this is a real win to create this environment which was both equally old and strikingly new, with lots of little pockets of space that you create that people can find their own little area. And on the left is part of the spa experience. So this is an attic space, and we've tried to make use of the fact that it's cute and cozy, and it's what you expect when you book a room in a hotel in the mountains. And for us, the most important thing was that there was fire. The final result was that you couldn't put real fire in there because of legal reasons and code reasons, but we were able to put an ethanol fire in there, and people still gravitate towards it. It's that thing of the heat and the light and being drawn into it. And, it's sitting on this kind of solid rock of granite. And then you've got these glimpsed views to the outside where the mountains are, snow-capped peaks. And that's a very social sort of space, but much more intimate than lots of hotel spaces. So it's important to provide those variety of spaces across a hotel, I think. These are two very intimate spaces. Again, really about kind of creating very tactile environments. Probably 90% of people will never see the image on the right when they go into the hotel unless they come particularly through a different route. But for us, it's important that presents itself in a really interesting way, even though it's a side entrance. And the route to the toilets. I'm going to talk about toilets, but. How do you enliven those things and make them joyful? Because that's what we're doing. Like, we basically just have to try to create this experience of kind of functionality balanced with joy. Those are important things that make people feel, well, this was worth staying here. I would like to come back.
And just to interrupt there, as a bloke, I don't really experience the conversations in toilets as much as women do. Tell me about that.
kind of controversial, but for all the women in the room, probably you remember having some great conversations with women. It's kind of, instead of being, you know, in and out as quick as you can, a lot of times it's where you break down the barriers with a fellow female, and creating the right lighting, the ambience. You know, there's a million things that help create these really not only functional. So our idea is to sort of encourage this kind of cozy feeling in those spaces. And sometimes it's to surprise. So, you know, the kind of, the next. Yeah, so this is obviously a male toilet. This is at the Shard. So we did a restaurant there a number of years ago, and the problem with designing in an all-glass building is to try and find some way to make it all functional. And there's this kind, you know, this is up on the 30th floor or thereabouts, and the toilets, you know, you've got to try and make it equally interesting to the rest of the space. I mean, that's what we feel anyway. It should be equally interesting. But here, the kind of humour is in the fact that the
view.
urinals face out to the view. Like, why shouldn't you take in the view?
Well, nobody's going to spot me from that distance.
Exactly. And it's a little bit controversial these days. You can't really do them here, but the idea of the bathroom on the left is a kind of combination. So you've got male and female washing their hands in the same space, but that's tricky now.
Is that tricky?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think basically the rules have changed recently, and the advice is to kind of create separate spaces or self-enclosed, toilet and washing cubicle. But no conversation. Yeah, no kind of glances to the other side. You know, that maybe the guy who you've been talking to in the bar. None of that anymore. The other thing I just wanted to kind of, one of the things where you start a project and you think you know the full extent of a project, and sometimes it happens that you find things out as you go and you create this kind of curiosity about where you could add value for a client. And one of the things that happened on this hotel was they created this rooftop, which, didn't have much going on in the beginning, like there wasn't a plan to put anything on. But now it's got all of these amazing things that make it more comfortable and hospitable in the difficult Edinburgh weather to go and sit in an igloo and create this kind of protection and intimacy and be able to appreciate what's quite an amazing 360-degree view on top. So it's both a kind of party space and contemplation space, and if you're prepared to withstand the wind, a great place to go and gather. And I can't really leave the question of hospitality and kind of conversations without touching on some of the things about restaurants and bars. And I was speaking earlier about the experience of restaurant. There's a chap in the audience who was asking and saying he found it quite difficult sometimes because you can't hear. And so some of the things that we have to pay attention to about the relationship of, the kind of sound quality, the light quality, and strangely enough, until you're all going to go away now and try and remember this, but when you go to a restaurant and you've got a kind of banquette like this one here, there's usually this problem of the banquette tends to be a bit lower than a normal chair, and so you always have this kind of weird thing where you're sitting across from somebody but you're not looking eye to eye. So actually there's a huge amount of decision making in the design process to try and get you that like comfort level, that equality of everyone has a great seat, everyone is able to look at each other in the eye, and even finding the kind of right height for the countertop for both functionality and comfort, and does it have a foot bar, a footrest, and all those kind of millions of decisions help to make you feel comfortable, have a comfortable experience, and you always know when something doesn't feel, you might not know why, but you feel something's kind of off, and it doesn't really help your experience. So, good design is about considering all of those things. Mm. Always look for a hook, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are restaurants that want you to feel uncomfortable because they want to churn quickly.
Right.
Their business plan means that if they put you on an unupholstered wooden chair.
Have you had to design
so
one?
So the acoustic is to get you moving quickly. But if you go to a Michelin star product, then everything absolutely has to be seamless. Everything is very well thought out. And you mentioned earlier about the Hurlingham. This is quite interesting because we've been looking at a kind of master plan. The first part of the master plan is their restaurant. They haven't done a restaurant in a really, really long time, and the thinking process of how that's happened is incredible, and also getting it through and signed off by everyone in a club environment is quite tricky. But they're all about the kind of outdoors and this kind of connection with the outside. That's really part of the splendor of the Hurlingham Club, is this beautiful capability brown gardens and that sort of inside-outside feeling. But also, a lot of thinking about the different zoning of spaces, creating we could talk about creating kind of a landscape or a topography in a restaurant and bar where you have to try and, I guess, give visual interest across the landscape. If everything's flat, it's not very interesting to look at. It also doesn't offer people a variety of types of seating to use. And then also thinking about where your eye goes to next. So private dining rooms and, kind of resting on different things around the room. The final thing I just want to touch on, because it's so related to Emma, is this idea of wellness spaces. And, obviously in hotels it's become quite a thing now, rather than being an afterthought, if I'm going to be 5-star, I've got to have a pool and it's tick the box. But these are actually genuinely, so this is at the Mandarin Oriental, and this is genuinely the tiniest spa ever. In fact, they didn't want to call it a spa to begin with because it doesn't align with their brand, because it doesn't have all of the things in it. But actually, this idea of tactility was really important because it's a tiny space, and we just used lovely quality stone everywhere, but we rounded the corners because everyone's getting up, close, and it's got to feel really comfortable to sit on with a sort of semi-naked body, and all of those things are part of the process. And we might not be able to give you wild, but we can certainly try to give you something which feels a little bit kind of magical or thought-provoking in some way, something that sort of lifts the spirit or calms you down. So we quite often use dark to do that. So quiet, dark, contemplative. It's very much not the social side of, communal bathing. And occasionally we do get some of the wild, but in a very kind of curated way, in the form of rooftop pools with stunning Swiss lake views, etc.
One last question for you before I turf you out of the mastermind seat. Is you used to lead on education and laboratory projects, and now you work on hospitality projects.
That's right.
Are there elements that you brought from one to the other, or is there a sort of cross-fertilization aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is I think I started out by saying hospitality has started to bleed into lots of areas of design. I think people have realized that experience is essential in all types of spaces. You know, trying to make people feel a certain way or encourage certain types of interactions. You know, education has become hugely important in creating those interactions between, you know, like at Graphene or at University of Cambridge. We just finished a physics lab there. These serendipitous crossing over of people is even more important these days because people are so tied to screens and technology, and actually facilitating that human connection is absolutely fundamental to the way we design education projects across the board. And so you don't have the same kind of budgets or attention to, you know, choices of material. You know, you don't have wall-to-wall stone, not in this country. In Switzerland, actually, you might do. But the same concept applies. And I think it's really nice because there would have been a time when maybe interior design was considered to be inferior to architecture. And I think the way, well, as I stand as an architect working mostly in interiors, to me, one of the main reasons why I find it quite joyful is because it places humans at the center of design. And, you know, I remember being so disappointed in the past with projects that you spent everything on the outside and you got nothing left for the inside. And that's where people spend all their time. They work there. You know, the lighting is boring and, you know, why can't we teach kids in joyful spaces? Why is color our only tool to, you know, enliven a space? It shouldn't be so. You know, why do you have to fight for quality things that will last a long time because it says in the spreadsheet that, you know, this is our target? And I think sustainability efforts should help to change that, whereby you'll realize that spending a bit of extra money up front will get you a better lifespan for a particular product. So there are loads of, you know, things that are kind of merging about the two facets of where I've worked.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. Quick round of applause. And pass the baton on.
I feel like I've been to all these expensive places I'm never going to afford to. It's like, wow.
Go down to the beach.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I mention one
Of
thing?
course.
Sorry, forgive me. Just one thing. You said something beautiful, really, really beautiful. And for me, it was about staircases. Now, you conjured up something that I haven't thought about for 20 years. 20 bloody years. And what was it? Sorry, I've had a drink, by the way. What you said something about staircases, and you reminded me of a client that I work with and other designers that I work with, whereby the client said, I want my Fred and Ginger moment. What do they mean by that? They meant the staircase. Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire, famous for doing amazing dancing, but there's lots of scenes with them doing dancing on the staircase. Now, I was working on a law firm. I won't tell you who it was I was working with, but the client says, I want my Fred and Ginger moment on this staircase. And I like to see people coming up and down the stairs, which is quite a remarkable thing for a client to say. I like to have encounters on the staircase. And that's an amazing thing. So your point about staircases being important. Staircases have always been important, but you sort of reinforced it, and they're still as important now as they always were. In fact, they're probably even more because you use the word serendipity, that sort of random moments. And you know, you've probably got connections between departments going up and down a staircase, so they're even more important. And so I like what you mentioned. Thanks for conjuring that back up.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a staircase, I guess you could think about it as a very logical A to B kind of thing. But the whole point is architecture and interior design is not just about fulfilling like the spatial needs. It's about making things, beautiful things to look at, beautiful things that make you feel joy when you go into work, hopefully. When you go on a cruise that you spent a lot of money saving up for, or go to a hotel, we place a lot of emphasis in hospitality on those because that's an experience that you've worked for. But why shouldn't all sorts of other buildings have the same kind of attention to detail? You know, the Finns can do it.
Right. Last but definitely not least, we've got Russell Brown, who is a founding partner of Hawkins Brown, and will be talking about some of the practice's major schemes, such as Hackney Town Hall, Oxford University, Park Hill in Sheffield, Gillette Square, or is it Gillett? Gillette, the best a man can get. And again in Hackney, perhaps his own offices in the former Vitra Boo building in Clerkenwell, over the road, and generally about how to design laboratory and other projects to stimulate interaction and those mutual eureka moments. As he mentioned in an email on this session, and I quote, "It is a major feature of Hawkins Brown architecture to encourage people to meet in as many places as possible to exchange ideas and gossip or vote or riot."
Yes, well, riots, yes.
Over to you.
Gillette Square, they rioted, yes. Oh God, I've got to do slides and talk. I'm not very good at the minute. How do we get? Am I going to get down? There we go. It is great. We're going to go from these highfalutin hotels to Park Hill in Sheffield with a housing scheme, 1960s concrete, and how you make that a warm communal space. So we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. I'm quite interested. So this is I'm a great fan of Richard Sennett, and we're very lucky to have him as an intellectual in London, although he came all the way from Chicago. And there's a book that a mate of mine read and explained it to me, The Fall of the Public Man. It was published variously either in 1977 or 1979, depending on whether you were in America or you were here. And basically, it's criticising the sort of hippie self-centered thing about how it's almost the classless society means you don't have a framework for talking to people that aren't like you, and there's this sort of self-centered sense. And this is way back in 77, and obviously we're seeing that accelerating with screens and anti-social media as opposed to social media. So it's very prescient, but it's quite interesting, and he's talking about mainly language, but how if you were a squire going across, 200 years ago, you could talk to your workmen because you had a social framework for it. Maybe you talked about the weather or you talked about apples or whatever it was, but somehow this sort of framework for communication has shrunk, and people talk about themselves, and people, there's a sort of loss of communality, and obviously Thatcher and the loss of community. And then it gets down to sort of people like Michael Moore have carried on this, and Bowling from Culloden. So this has always been a sort of fascination with me, and way back from that book, and always very aware of it. So I'm going to try and... So you're going to get, having seen all this stone and beautiful lighting, you're going to get... So this is Hackney Town Hall, and we do a lot of work on town halls, because they're wonderful. They are a focus of civic pride, and sadly, they're mostly run down in Hackney Town Hall. So you're going to see, this is where I was married. We're getting the photograph. My wife will now be embarrassed. This is where I got married. This is my children were registered. But I'm really fascinated by this idea about its representation of the sort of a borough, a London borough, and this is where you come to vote, and this is where you come to protest, this is where you come to I have planning committee meetings here, which is obviously very central to our lives as architects. But how accessible is it? It's got a great big bloody stairs up the front. Off to the right, they finally built a ramp to get people up there, but only after it had been built for about 40 years. And when you used to go in, of course, you got the grumpy security man who didn't let you, and the whole place was run down, and the corridors were terrible, and wayfinding was impossible. So we've worked on this building for years, trying to bring it round to be a place where people are welcomed, and it becomes like a business centre, or it's also, you can have parties here. Actually, people had concerts here,
And so it's about bringing it back and finding as many ways. And I was really fascinated by the ideas stores, which David Adjaye, which sort of died off. It was a bit of a shame, but that they were in very poor communities. A lot of them were about teaching English, and this whole thing about how the town hall became a library and a business centre. They'd learn English there. People would go and vote. So this whole idea about how precious this connection and the public. So here's this to embarrass my wife. There you go. This is me. So we're not even.
Also, could you just hold your microphone?
Oh, sorry. Yes, so I'm waving it around as usual. They were building the ramp at the front of the building. So this is us on the back steps. But, it's memories. This is how a place, it's just some steps outside a building which will forever be remembered. And so this is inside. So the left-hand slide is there's a couple of light wells. In fact, it wasn't as tidy as this. It was full of a load of old crap and burnt tyres and all sorts. It got cleaned out a bit. And the whole idea is how could you add extra space and actually a way of earning extra money. So now they have parties and fashion shows and stuff here. And so we converted it. There you go. And these are a little bit sparse, but you'll see a more active photograph. But literally turning the building so all the corridors look into it, opening up stuff, and getting a lift in, obviously bringing accessibility. So the whole building has this sort of communal heart. And then you get events in the evening. Obviously, it keeps the weather out as well. So this whole thing about, almost super ramming people together, ways about connecting in lots and lots of different ways. And the light fittings on the right really aren't quite as expensive as the Jessica and Wiles one either. I'm a bit embarrassed about them. Anyway, and then it's lovely because it ties very much with your slides. The Graphene Institute, which you could have, has a lovely thing where there's a walkway round all the labs, so almost you're looked in upon, and there's a lovely connection about seeing other people's research. And this is a building we did in Oxford. This is biochemistry, where in the same way the labs are on the outside and you see them from the street. And we got obsessed about our staircases, and they're a bit Harry Potter. We almost wish they could move at night, sort of thing. And they have a cafe, and they sort of take the rise out of themselves by having the Rosage block tests on the wall because they're scientists. So it's about...
You're curating chance encounters there, aren't you? That's precisely what you're doing.
Yeah, and literally we, as you said, we do a little break in the handrail as a place people stop and lean on the railing in just the ways you were talking about. And also we have a pause in the stairs, partly because building regs stops you after 16 steps, but that you stop and you might lean and have a chat and the balustrade bends back. And then here's another one. So then this is even more strongly, this is a physics building, the Beecroft building, and they had been in an old building that had this sort of split level. So literally they wanted the center of the building to have these curved blackboards where literally they come out and discuss great ideas and Nobel Prize winning. And the offices are on a half level. But the whole thing is why couldn't scientists have lovely spaces in just the way you were saying? And that, they used to have a broken kettle and a dodgy fridge. And now, you're finding a way of really valuing this interaction. And actually, it's gone to a sort of statistics where in the new building for biochem, the amount of applications for new research and how many of people they attracted to the building has actually increased 200%. They can actually say they're getting more funding because we're banging their heads together. They have to come out of their labs and meet and get together in this rather wild space with the curved blackboard. Yeah, we must be mad.
If they tell you scientists are not necessarily, naturally communal people,
No, yeah.
They would rather sit in very small offices and
and close the door, yes.
Exactly.
And we didn't give them, they're all glass doors, we wouldn't let them, yeah. So then here we go, we really are getting, so this is Park Hill, which is the biggest listed conservation building, biggest listed building in Europe, very famous being horribly run down. And the walkways here were quite famous in that they were streets in the sky, and that whole 60s idea, but actually they didn't have the front doors onto them. So what we did when we redid it with Tom Bloxham and Urban Splash is we actually got the front doors come up and we have little windows so you can actually see in. So when somebody comes to your front door, you can see it. And I always love that. I think it's in Amsterdam where they do that little thing. They show their hobbies off in their front window. And so this is here that there's, my son has a flat here now, but 2 doors down there's an architectural model maker, and 3 doors down somebody's got their records propped in it. So people display something about themselves and add it to the walkways. And then here on the left, we're very deliberately having the balcony so you can lean, you can be private, or maybe we'd really rather force you to talk to your neighbours. So this idea that even on your private balcony, you lean out, and always consciously trying to make these connections, get a lean, can you stop, in just the same way you were talking about.
Your social engineering, in a way.
Yes, yeah. And then this is Gillette Square. This was, it's in Hackney, and this is where the word yard is. Literally, this was a no-go zone on the weekends where there's drug dealing, particularly at night, pretty terrible. And that slowly, the building on the right, you can see the sort of blue one. The first thing we did was a row of Victorian workshops, and the walkway was on the back, but the walkway looked over the car park. So you got this sort of overlooking of the space and gently owning it. And then another phase on the right, we built the jazz club. And so it's mad, this. They have Turkish football, they have parties. This was the jazz festival.
What is Turkish football?
Oh, sorry, they screen the Turkish
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yes.
It was like a Turkish bath.
Has a bit of massage, has a bit of spa in it. Yes, they all pummel each other during the game. Yeah, and so there's this big scale thing, and then I think the other thing is that during the day, it has a little raised dais and a couple of trees, and just to try and get the scale that it comes, you have to find the sort of scale where you can have a little space and a big space, and trying to enact it every way we can. It's quite interesting. It's become quite gentrified now, and the local householders, they want the little stage that this bloke and the girl are sitting on ripped out because it attracts street drinkers. So actually, it's become gentrified, and they want to move away from the rather exciting communal nature of Gillette Square. So when they had the riots in Hackney, I don't know, it must be 5 or 6 years ago, and stomped down Mare Street and broke into all the shops, everybody phoned each other, and they met in Gillette Square, and then they had the riot. So basically, it's, real community, real democracy. All the phone signals, they collected in Gillette Square, and then they burnt down half the high street, but there you go. So then and here's finally, I'm sorry, it's a bit, my slides aren't quite as slick as yours, but they're a bit all over the place. So this is our office, which was the old Vitra showroom, and one of the things that I've always the kids, I call them, in my office, I worry that they spend their whole time on the screen. And as architects and designers, you need to get out there and try, experience life as much as possible. So we're now in a shop front, and we have quite a lot of community events that come in, and various clubs and stuff happen. And then the other thing here, we're going back to the sort of scale. So most of the conversation, well, people queue for our coffee machine, which breaks down regularly because it's so overused. They can have a chat about architecture. And then finally, there you go. And then we have groups. This was the Chinese New Year. PQ there was very proud that her community could come in and use the building for us.
Have you noticed a marked change in your staff since the move? Because of this facility to chat more, are you less efficient?
Oh yes. Well, in the old place we had it, but it was off to one side. We had what we called the banquet, rather. It's a load of plywood, timber. Yeah, not really the standard of your hotel. The irony, yes, we called. So we've always been a bit like that, and it's quite interesting. You hear the noise go up as it comes to lunchtime because everybody sits and has their lunch together. So the noise raises to sort of 11:30, 12. I think so. I mean, it's partly just looking after each other. It's not really whether it's a great design. I mean, the real test of it is whether boys and girlfriends frame and then get married. And we have quite a lot of couples now that have found their partner, both them. There you go, you see, yes. That's rather chancy, yes. I hadn't thought. That's what we need. We need a sauna, don't we, really?
So would you say broadly your designs are looking to curate scenarios where people chat more across the board?
Yes. Well, because I think in like the educational buildings, they always say that, what as they used to say, that you learn more in the 10 minutes before a lesson or the 10 minutes after a lesson, stood in the corridor, than you did actually when the teacher was talking to you. And I think in all these sort of situations, it's the sort of chance encounters and the sort of mixing. There's also lovely when we do schools, is kids will say, oh, I don't like maths. But if they're sat in the geography lesson and they can see a window through, they go, oh, that maths lesson, everybody's laughing and having a good time. So there's this sort of casual contact that sort of breaks down barriers. And I suppose it's also that sort of Rem Koolhaas, he's an architect. He likes really thin walls because then people have to behave on either side of it. Huh. If you have a thick wall, you get away with it and you can be obnoxious. If you have a thin wall and they get noisy on the other side, you have to go and talk to them and tell them to shut up. But it's a way of actually creating, and he's quite deliberate.
But is there some positive with the thin walls?
Yeah.
Rather than just telling people to shut up.
Yeah, but he likes this, and he talks about having the thinnest walls possible because it almost you can almost see through it, and so it fosters deliberately this connection, and the fact you can't lock yourself away, you have to talk to next door, you have to cooperate, you have to work together.
I'm conscious of time and the fact that I've hogged all the questions. So are there any questions from our salon people out there?
It's not a question, it's an observation. Just to carry on that, quite curious that the toilet space that you and I was wondering, because I noticed the differences, because maybe you see the ladies usually have a longer queue than the men, and I noticed that it's the time that you start making kind of conversations, and almost like a liminal space that when you are in the corridor, then I wonder if you ever design something for the corridors of,
Corridors to the ladies.
or going to the bathroom, the washrooms and those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why the photos I was showing were to kind of show you how every single corner should be thought about, because there's always this possibility to create an impression or something that's like kind of joyful and memorable. Like, why shouldn't all of those spaces be surprising, interesting, curated in some way? I mean, not everything has to be curated, but it's our job as designers to kind of curate and socially engineer partially. I think you're right. For a lot of women, they'll probably know the kind of queuing aspect is what breaks down the barriers a little bit. But occasionally, you'll go in and you'll say to a woman, oh, I like what you're wearing. And, there's moments of where you can, I think, let go of the boundaries that might occur outside, and you instantly have some connection with that person you're standing, washing your hands with. They might compliment you or start a conversation about, are you having a nice night, or have you seen those crazy toilets? Oh, look, it's like I don't know. People are more open, certainly, in ladies' toilets. I can't speak for men's toilets.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on it now. You're mainly saying, well,
See the football last night?
I'm waiting for the results this evening, but mostly you're complaining that the tap isn't working in the toilet, or they've run out of bog roll. Yeah, that's mainly the level of conversation. So that's if there's any conversation at all.
It's very interesting, actually, because men's toilets are full-on, functional, almost factory spaces. Whereas I think women's spaces are social spaces. I think there's a job to be done, which is a physical process, and then you leave, essentially. You get your hands dried, you wash your hands, if you're lucky, in some scenarios, and then you leave. And so it becomes a process space, not a social space. It's very interesting, actually, to think about it like that. Because, and sadly, men's toilets aren't looked after half as well either. And despite the fact that most men don't spend very much time there. It's extraordinary.
We've lowered the tone.
Well, on that bombshell. on that bombshell, I think we can. I just want to thank our speakers. You've got something else to say? Sorry, one more. We should have another session on.
Psychology.
The size of toilets, of public toilets across Europe changes a lot. Have you ever noticed that in the UK, the toilets are like super squeezed and super small, so you can really barely turn around. But if you go to Paris or to other places, you have a more generous space.
Wow.
Definitely notice in airports that in some countries you get much more generous toilets in airports than in even some surprising spaces where are people expecting us to have bags or not? I have a big suitcase. How am I going to manage that? That's even part of the breaking down of what happens in a toilet. My bag doesn't fit in the cubicle. Can you look after it for me? There's a trust that builds once you step into a toilet space.
You don't get that
In an airport.
It's a mystery to us.
It's definitely a space where people
It's a safe
leave
space.
something at the door, and a barrier breaks down once you go in as a woman. You should have that experience one day.
Yep. I think it's a future salon debate about toilets, perhaps.
Absolutely.
All sorts of emotional things happening in the ladies.
Yeah.
You could be going in there to regain composure, and you kind of had a moment of unguardedness where you're checking your lipstick, or you're like, oh, I hadn't realised my mascara had run.
Right, I'm going to pull the chain now. So,
The blokes, it's just in and out.
thank you. Can we thank our speakers? Brilliant. And thanks to 1632.
And a big thank you for David as our host as well.
Yes.
Really. Please, by all means, stay and join us for another drink. And thank you very much again for coming.